Today, I have some updates to the global public health mafia swamp. More connections came to light after I did my last video, so I want to share those updates with you today. There's kind of three different topics, but they all surround, of course, the pandemic, the coronavirus, and the characters involved in that. So for the first story, I have to remind you that Anthony Fauci at the NIAID gave money, a total of $7.4 million over a number of years, to the Wuhan Institute of Virology in Wuhan, China. And as we all know, that is the epicenter of the current coronavirus pandemic. Now, there's debate about whether it was, manipulated in a lab or whether it was a purposefully released bioweapon, whether it escaped. Nobody is in agreement as to what happened there. But one thing everybody does agree upon is that the Wuhan Institute of Virology had some sort of role in the current pandemic. All right. Now, I found a press release from the Wuhan Institute of Virology that had an interesting couple of factoids in it. Here's the article. Here's the press release here from November 21st, 2018. Experts of public health from 10 African countries visited Wuhan Institute of Virology and CAS, that's the Chinese Academy of Science. And it says, since its establishment, the CGPH has managed and implemented foreign aid mission assigned by the National Health and Family Planning Commission and the Ministry of Commerce of China, as well as international cooperation projects funded by the United Kingdom Department for International Development and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Boom. There you have a direct connection to China, this CGPH organization, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. What projects are the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation sponsoring through the CGPH? We don't know, but that is a pretty interesting funding arrangement they've got there. Patrick Howley saw my tweet about this on May 7th, and he put together something on May 9th that covers this a little bit, slightly more extensively. It's not a very long article. Thank you for crediting me, Patrick. You are a gentleman. I have another story by Patrick Howley coming up in this as well, and I will leave links to them in the description box. Further, on the Wuhan Institute of Virology site, we see they have a section on their committees. One of the committees is called the Scientific Advisory Committee of Center for Emerging Infectious Diseases. And just a few things that caught my eye were that the director is in Australia. The deputy director is in France. So the Wuhan Institute of Virology has a lot of international projects, personnel. Here's someone from Malaysia, another one from Australia, Texas. Stefan Wagner from the National Microbiology Lab in Manitoba, Canada is an interesting one. We'll talk more about that later. Here's another one from France. And the Wuhan Institute of Virology has another committee, International Executive Committee of Performance Evaluation. The director is from Duke University, USA. And I don't know if you remember from my last video, was mostly focusing on a guy called Victor Zhao. And he's a Duke alumnus, as is Paul Farmer is a Duke alumnus. And we're going to talk more about Paul Farmer soon. When we look at the Center for Global Public Health's page on the Chinese CDC site, it says it was established in August 2016 with the main responsibility of achieving China's global health strategy, implementing the National Public Health Aid Mission, and planning and managing international public health cooperation projects. And here again, down at the bottom, it confirms that they carry out international cooperation projects funded by the UK Department for International Development and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I should mention that the Chinese CDC had a representative at Event 201, a guy called George Gao. We'll see him in a minute. I searched for more information on this, and I didn't find anything specific. It doesn't seem to have its own website independent of the one on the Chinese CDC, and it has mentions, as I showed you, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But when I do search for that phrase, this comes up. They do have, on the University of Manitoba, a page that is about the CGPH. One of their partners is China, but it's not at Wuhan, it's Sichuan University. So I'm not sure if it's the same thing or not. However, if you recall, in the Wuhan Institute of Virology committee page, they do say that one of their scientific advisors is Stefan Wagner, National Microbiology Laboratory, Public Health Agency of Canada, Winnipeg, Manitoba. And interestingly enough, the University of Manitoba is where our National Microbiology Lab is, a level 4, same as the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It's the same, that it's at the University of Manitoba. So I'm not sure if these things are connected or not, but it would be very interesting if they were, because if U of Manitoba's Center for Global Public Health is the same thing as the Chinese Center for Global Public Health, it would go far to explain this news story from July 2019, in which Chinese spies were kicked out of the Manitoba Microbiology Lab for alleged spying. 2 of them worked for the University of Manitoba as well. And that's this story from July 15th, 2019, CBC News. Dr. Zhengguo Qiu works in Level 4 containment at the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg. She was part of the team that developed ZMapp, a treatment for Ebola. The University of Manitoba has cut ties with 2 researchers who were escorted out of the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg earlier this month until an RCMP investigation is complete. So, I don't know if these things are connected, but if Bill Gates Foundation and the UK International Development Department both fund the CGPH, I wonder if there's Gates money flowing into the University of Manitoba through that program. And I wonder if any of that was going towards projects at the Level 4 Microbiology Lab. Wouldn't that be interesting? Now, there's something else to this story. Just after the outbreak began in North America, a guy called Frank Plummer mysteriously died in Kenya after going on a safari, and he was there apparently to deliver a keynote address on AIDS, because Frank Plummer was a Canadian scientist, academic, and HIV/AIDS researcher. He was a recognized specialist in infectious diseases whose work influenced public health policy in Canada and abroad. He was very famous in the world of AIDS at the same time as Anthony Fauci was making his name in the world of AIDS, and he worked at the University of Manitoba. He was part of that virology lab. Plummer was born and raised in Winnipeg, where he headed up Canada's National Microbiology Lab for several years. Here's the article about him dying. It was on February 4th. So like I said, just after the virus started gaining traction in North America. So it's very curious. At first they didn't release his cause of death, and then later they said it was a heart attack. But look at this interesting little tidbit here. Plummer was most recently living in Toronto, where he underwent experimental brain surgery to fight alcohol addiction. He was believed to be the first person in North America to undergo deep brain stimulation for that project. That's very curious, and that ties over to a guy called Charles Lieber, who had just been arrested the week before Plummer died in Kenya. And Charles Lieber's work was all about injecting this tiny, tiny nano mesh into people's brains to control specific neural circuits. And this Frank Plummer died shortly after he received that experimental treatment on his brain for alcoholism. Now, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but it's just an odd coincidence. Here's Lieber here. And he was arrested January 28th. The complaint alleges that Lieber had lied about his affiliation with the Wuhan University of Technology, which is not the same thing as the Wuhan viral lab. I can't keep my words straight. It's not the same thing, but it's in the same general, it's in the same vicinities. So Charles Lieber, 60, who is the chair of Harvard's Chemistry and Chemical Biology Department, is accused of lying about working with several Chinese organizations where he collected hundreds of thousands of dollars from Chinese entities and did not report it. His work, here's something from 2015, a flexible mesh to record the brain. Lieber's work was all about, as I said, this nano mesh. And here is a record of a 2017 grant that he got from the National Institutes of Health. Charles Lieber, Harvard University, 2017, National Institute of Health. So as I said, Frank Plummer mysteriously dies a week after Charles Lieber is arrested, and just a little ways into the coronavirus epidemic exploding, so they say, in North America. Now, he would have been a vital resource about all of this, wouldn't he? He knew all about, he worked on all the same things through the years as Anthony Fauci worked on. All the same things. And just when Canada might need to call on his expertise, he dies. And he dies not too long after getting some kind of experimental brain treatment. Now, there's more. Frank Plummer, the guy who died, is the mentor and friend of a woman called Theresa Tam. Theresa Tam is currently Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, so of course she's in charge of pandemic response here. But that's not all. Theresa Tam is on the board of a World Health Organization committee called the Independent Oversight and Advisory Committee for the WHO Health Emergencies Program. There she is right there. You can see where the arrow's coming from at the very bottom there. And that committee was the one which was commissioned by the GPMB, the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, which I talked about in my last video. That committee of the WHO that Theresa Tam was on wrote one of these 7 reports. It wrote this one, the one called From Never Again to the New Normal. And as I discussed last time, that is the report, one of 7, that led eventually to Event 201. To refresh your memory, here's the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. This is some of their board of directors. This is just the first 6 people. And already you can see there's Victor Zhao, there's Chris Elias. He's from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He took part in Event 201. Here's George Gao, who I told you about earlier, from the Chinese CDC, represented at Event 201. Also on the board of the GPMB, Anthony Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Yes, so there are a lot of swamp creatures all gathered together on this Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. The connections just keep coming. All right, let's move to the next story, which is about this Neil Ferguson, who was the guy that wrote the first modeling program for the coronavirus to see how it was going to spread, and he predicted huge death tolls. You recall this guy? This on April 2nd, they're talking about him being one of the highest profile faces in the effort to use mathematical models that will predict the spread of the virus. And then fast forward to May 6th, Professor Lockdown Modeler resigns in disgrace. Neil Ferguson is the British academic who created the infamous Imperial College model that warned Boris Johnson that without immediate lockdown, the coronavirus would cause 500,000 deaths and swamp the National Health Service. Well, he turned out to be wrong. And in this article, which I'll link to in the description box, there are a lot of people going on record saying it was so wrong, he should be ashamed. I can't even understand how he put this thing out. It's foolish. It was dangerous. This quote here actually says he is also one of the most wrong. So that's Neil Ferguson, and he was from the Imperial College. That's who put together that model. Well, on Twitter, Maria Sederholm, she sent me this on May 10th. Just watched your latest video. Amazing, simply amazing, one of your best. You didn't mention that Dr. Zhao is also on the board of Imperial College Health Partners, the Imperial College where Neil Ferguson crafted the landmark report that put whole countries in lockdown. Boom. That is a huge boom. I can't believe it. Victor Zhao is everywhere in all the important places. Do you notice that? He's in all the important places that are playing a role in this. He's on CEPI. He's on the GPMB. He's the president of the National Academy of Medicine and more. And now we find this. And there he is there. The Imperial College Health Partners, Victor Zhao, board member. And I checked just to make sure, because sometimes these things have very similar names, but they're not the same at all. Here's the Imperial College London webpage, and down at the bottom you see Imperial Partners. Imperial College Health Partners is one of their officially named on their website partners. So yes, Maria, thank you so much. Boom. Another unbelievable connection. But I have more. Franklin Campbell sent me this on Twitter. I was doing some digging on a CNN report predicting 137,000 deaths by August. This is in the US. The new model came out of the University of Washington and then provides a link to a press release from the IHME. Who are they? So he sends me a link to it. Remember Victor Zhao? They set the metric. And I thought to myself, you have got to be kidding. He is not on that board too. But he is. Boom. It's just all unraveling for them. The global public health mafia is being exposed every day more. No wonder they are in such a huge panic. They really are, I believe, in a huge panic. This stuff is toxic to them. This is the sunlight that all vampires fear. And I am so stoked to see so many people engaged and involved and sending me these things and allowing me to be a part of it. And all of the other researchers doing incredible, incredible work. There's so much going on out there. Incidentally, the IHME also has on its board Jane Halton, who was a participant in Event 201. She was also one of the players. It's just one big incestuous group. And just in case you aren't sure who the IHME is and how significant they are, this is just the first 3 news articles that pop up on Google. Coronavirus, IHME prediction increases U.S. deaths. National Post 6 days ago. Horrible thing. Researchers double the U.S. COVID-19 death tolls. The IHME projections. U.S. researchers predict 135,000 coronavirus deaths by August. IHME. They are key in the fear factor. And the funny thing is, the White House task force was using the IHME and it was coming back with lowish numbers at the beginning. And Trump was relying on it quite heavily and he's saying, look, even the models are saying it's not going to be that bad. And all of a sudden, 6 days ago, boom, they used new parameters and now all of a sudden, it's going to be a dire health crisis again by August. See how that works? They weren't getting the fear levels they wanted, I guess. So they just changed a few things in their formula and boom, it's scary again. Okay, what's next? Okay, yes. This is more news on Partners in Health. Do you remember that? That was about the contact tracing. Patrick Howley at National File has unearthed some shocking details that I didn't see when I did my report. Let me just read this to you. Partners in Health was recently selected by Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker to conduct coronavirus contact tracing, a process that involves teams of investigators finding out who infected people have come into contact with. The group is already, quote, training and deploying hundreds of contact tracers. Some citizens fear the potential for mass surveillance posed by contact tracing, especially in light of a Democrat-introduced bill in Congress to authorize contact tracing, quote, at individuals' residences. This is that H.R. 6666. Again with the 666, right? Partners in Health's involvement will not assuage many fears, considering the group has received funding from George Soros and Bill Gates organizations and counts Chelsea Clinton on its board of trustees. And just for you to have a quick look, these are the Partners in Health donors of $1 million and above. And here we see Bill and Melinda Gates. And we see Open Society Foundation, which is George Soros. So confirmed, not that I doubt Patrick Howley's work at all, but there's more on here that will interest you, I'm sure, like the Google Foundation, Reid Hoffman, that's the Salesforce guy, that's the LinkedIn guy. Cargill is the meat processing plants in Canada anyway that are supposedly having COVID outbreaks. But Cargill is also a pharmaceutical company, so it wins either way with these types of outbreaks, I suppose. All right, that's it for today. I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to show you the graphic. Hopefully I've got everything on here. So what we added to the swamp today was that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as the National Institute of Health, both give money to organizations that serve the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And this guy, Neil Ferguson from Imperial College, he was one of the guys that put out the dire predictions very early on, and the governments relied on that, and therefore they locked us all down. It turns out that Victor Zhao is on the board of Imperial College Health Partners. So he has a link to this guy. And this guy was pivotal to the globalists, the public health mafia, creating the lockdown scene that we're under today. That's in the UK, but turns out Victor Zhao had the American numbers modeling covered as well. Anthony Fauci has relied on the numbers coming out of the IHME. So their models will predict how long lockdown goes on and that sort of thing. And of course, Victor Zhao is on the board of that as well. Also in today's video, we learned that there might be a connection back to the University of Manitoba with this CGPH, Center for Global Public Health, and the Manitoba Microbiology Lab. I mean, if these things are connected, it kind of makes the Wuhan Virology Lab connected to the University of Manitoba Virology Lab. And don't forget those Chinese spies, Chinese subverters, who knows what they were removed involuntarily from the lab and the university in July 2019. And finally, through Patrick Howley, we learned that Paul Farmer's Partners in Health is supported in a big way by Bill and Melinda Gates and George Soros, and that Chelsea Clinton actually sits on their board of trustees. Don't forget, we learned in the last video that Victor Zhao and Paul Farmer both went to Duke, and they're both involved in McGill, McGill's new school of population and global health. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, and if you could follow it, please leave me a thumbs up. Please leave me a comment. I love the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Thank you, and welcome to all the new subscribers I've gotten in the last little while. If you'd like to support my work, you can do so through PayPal. I have a paypal.me address, which will be in a link in the description box and in the pinned comment below. Or you can send me something through the snail mail at my P.O. Box. I will list my P.O. Box on the contact page of my website, which is called amazingpolly.net. References down below as well. I think I covered everything. Thanks a lot for being here, everyone. Until next time, peace out.